Hey guys! Tonight we're stepping softly through a long stone corridor that smells faintly of candle wax and damp wool. The walls hum with the muffled echo of chanting monks somewhere beyond, and you, half awake, blanket warm in your mind, find yourself clutching a goose quill instead of your phone. The air tastes like ink and sleep. You're about to spend an entire night inside the quietest factory of the Middle Ages, the scriptorium, where the monks who gave us our books fought drowsiness, cold, and cramping fingers in the noble pursuit of perfect handwriting. You probably won't survive this shift without at least one ink blot on your sleeve, but that's half the charm. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're watching from some far-off place, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where these late-night journeys drift to. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The bell of the Abbey Tower strikes what the monks call matins, the earliest prayer before dawn. You're wrapped in a ruffled habit that smells faintly of the sheep it came from, and the world outside is still silver with mist. Inside, the scriptorium breathes slowly. Rows of desks angled toward narrow windows, a single candle guttering for each station. You can hear the rasp of parchment stretching on a frame as someone in the corner prepares a new sheet. The sound is delicate, like a bread crust cracking. You shuffle to your desk, where a half-finished page waits, the letters frozen mid-sentence since last night. Every monk here is both artisan and insomniac. Their task is to copy holy text so precisely that not even a sleepy twitch ruins the divine geometry of the letters. You rest your wrist on the slanted board and take a long breath, tasting the chill. The abbot insists that silence helps the soul align with the word of God, but your eyelids keep staging quiet protests. Somewhere outside, a rooster clears its throat and the candlelight trembles. In the world beyond these cloisters, people are plowing, fighting, or arguing about bread taxes. But in here, time feels suspended, anchored by rhythm. You dip the quill into a walnut brown ink and test it with a faint line. The nib squeaks slightly, too dry. The ink mixture, thick with gall and vinegar, sometimes thickens overnight like old honey. A brother beside you adjusts his sleeve and mutters a prayer that sounds suspiciously like a complaint. Monks aren't supposed to grumble, but the code doesn't read the rule of St. Benedict. Your first stroke begins, an elongated A curling down into its base. Medieval handwriting isn't handwriting so much as choreography. Every letter has a practiced angle. Every curve a theology of patience. One misplaced flick, and the page becomes an offering to the pile of regrettable experiments. Yet it's also hypnotic. Within minutes, the motion slows your pulse. Even the steady scratch of the other monks becomes like rain on a tiled roof. The candles hiss as drops of wax fall onto your desk, forming small milky puddles. You've seen older scribes scrape these wax spots off parchment with tiny knives, so deftly you'd swear they were performing surgery. The abbot claims that some monasteries, especially those in southern France, use sunlight reflected from polished bowls to illuminate their work, avoiding smoke stains entirely. Historians still argue whether that was practical or just legend passed down to impress donors. Your body adjusts to the dim light, and you begin noticing details. The faint chalk lines score into the parchment to guide letter height, the way the ink spreads minutely when your nib hesitates too long. These guides are the invisible scaffolding of beauty. One mainstream historical fact. In the 12th century, the monks of Canterbury developed a method called pricking and ruling, using a stylus to pierce faint dots through a stack of pages so each would share perfect alignment. A proto-photocopier tricked centuries ahead of office machines. A fringe tidbit whispered among novices. Some monks use a hum-specific chants while writing, believing the rhythm helped steady their hand. The most popular? A slow-paced kyrie that doubled as an early metronome. Whether the chant or caffeine substitute of the day, a thin herbal brew of chicory and mint did more for accuracy is up for debate. You shift on your bench. The wood is polished by generations of squirming monks who, just like you, realize that humility doesn't make a seat any softer. The room smells of tallow, glue, and faint ink acid. Someone sneezes, and the echo takes its time returning from the high ceiling beams. Bless you, no one says, that would break silence. Your quill scrapes another line. The sound feels ancient, personal. You imagine each letter, like a tiny prayer pressed into history. Some monks even believe the act of copying scripture could wash away sins, like running spiritual soap through one's fingertips. Whether or not you buy that theology, it gives an odd comfort. The idea that your messy, sleepy handwriting might be forgiven because it's aimed at eternity. The page gradually fills. Your hand cramps, and you pause to stretch your fingers. The ink on your knuckles leaves a small ghostly smudge when you rub them. To avoid dozing, you lift your eyes to the narrow window slit. Outside, the sun hasn't yet cleared the fog. The fields beyond the wall look like wet parchment themselves. Fatigue hits like a friendly ghost. It doesn't scare you, just wraps around you. You picture the countless monks who have fought the same fog of drowsiness. The Irish scribes' Akell's illuminating initials so intricate they looked alive. The German brothers illuminating psalms and scripts sharp enough to cut cloth. The Cistercians who ban bright decoration entirely and focus on divine simplicity. Each rule, each pen stroke, a philosophy of balance between order and devotion. You make a small error. Your nib spits a blob right on the word Dominus. Classic. You mutter a wordless prayer, then dab it with a crumb of blotting wool. Not perfect, but forgivable. There's comfort in that. 2. Perfection is a horizon you walk toward but never reach. A bell rings again, lauds, the dawn prayer. The room collectively exhales as everyone sets down their tools. The scratching stops, leaving a hum in your ears that feels like silence multiplied. You flex your wrist, glance at the page, and realize you've been so lost in the rhythm that you've written almost a full column. The letters aren't bad, either. The slanted strokes have kept their spacing even through your drowsy blinks. You rise slowly, candlelight throwing your shadow long across the floor. In the refectory, you'll soon get your morning portion of bread, and maybe a boiled egg if the kitchen feels generous. But for now, you linger by the desk, letting your fingertips trace the texture of the parchment, a strange blend of silk and sandpaper. Somewhere deep in the abbey, someone begins a low Gregorian note that trembles the air like a lullaby reversed. As you leave the scriptorium, the cold corridor meets you again, sharp and bracing. The day will be filled with chores, prayers, maybe garden duty, but you already know that tonight you'll be back here, quill in hand, repeating the same patient dance. There's a strange peace in repetition. It's how monks survive centuries and how you, in your own late-night world of screens and scrolling, might find a slower pulse again. When you finally reach your cot, straw-filled and slightly lumpy, you collapse with the pleasant heaviness of a tired hand. Outside, the fog has thinned. Somewhere, you imagine, another sleepy monk is just waking his bell and preparing to write the next line you'll copy tomorrow. The chain continues, unbroken, through the centuries, through drowsy hands, into your own imagination. The last thing you hear before sleep claims you is the faint crackle of parchment in your dreams, like someone turned the page of the world itself. The second bell of the morning hums through the cloister walls, softer this time, less an order, more suggestion. You stretch your stiff shoulders and shuffle back into the scriptorium, the room now pale with dawn. The candles from the night before are puddles of wax ghosts, and the air smells faintly of burnt wick and stale ink. The abbot insists that a tidy desk breeds a tidy soul, but tidiness here is more a hope than a law. Each station is an archaeological site of crumbs, quill shavings, and holy mutterings. You find your bench again, and before you sit, you check the tilt of the desk. Medieval monks took this seriously, because the wrong angle meant smudged lines, aching spines, and sleepy faces planted in wet ink. Your writing board, raised at about 30 degrees, lets gravity do half the work. It's balanced on a low trestle, sturdy as a sermon. You run your fingers along the grooves where generations of wrists have rested and realize this desk has absorbed centuries of half-finished thoughts. A mainstream historical fact drifts in as you adjust your seat. Monastic scribes were often trained to keep perfect posture, straight-backed, shoulders down, both feet flat on the ground. Chronic back pain was common, but so was pride and discipline. Some monasteries even required young scribes to copy while standing for their first months, supposedly to build endurance, but probably to stop them from falling asleep mid-gospel. You can almost hear a novice collapsing into his ink pot after hour 5, and someone whispering, "Endurance, brother." You test your posture now. Head balanced, elbows slightly off the board. You imagine a medieval wellness coach with a tonsure instead of a topknot, reminding you to engage your core as you copy the Psalms. The truth is, writing here is closer to meditation than labor. The spine's alignment isn't vanity. It's about channeling steadiness from head to hand. A single drooping shoulder means crooked lines. Next comes a cushion. Not soft, never soft, but a small folded piece of wool that separates your bones from the bench. The monks who first invented this humble seat accessory deserve sainthood. You settle down, wiggle once, and realize that comfort in the Middle Ages was an achievement, not an assumption. The abbot passes by, scanning posture like a general inspecting troops. One poor brother leans too far, and the abbot raps his desk lightly with a knuckle. The word bends not, he whispers. You suppress a smirk. It's not just vanity or order, it's survival. If you slump too long, the blood flow slows, the hands grow numb, and your quill betrays you. The monks knew this even without anatomy charts. Some even tied cords around their waist to remind them to sit tall, an early ergonomic hack. Historians still argue whether this practice was widespread or just one of those legendary exaggerations monastic chroniclers loved to copy. Either way, your spine straightens instinctively at the thought. Now, look at the desk itself, a miniature world of geometry and restraint. There's a slanted board for parchment, a tiny ledge to keep your quill from rolling, and a small ink pot built into a corner cutout. Every detail serves the same god, order. To your left, a shallow box of pumice powder to roughen smooth parchment. To your right, a scrap of cloth to dab excess ink. Above, a window slit narrow enough to remind you that light is rationed like wine. The light changes constantly here. In the morning, it's forgiving, soft, making your page glow like frosted milk. By noon, it's blinding, and the monks shift their benches, adjusting the angle to chase shade. One fringe tidbit passed down to the abbey says some scribes in alpine monasteries use thin sheets of mica, translucent mineral windows, to diffuse the glare. Whether that's fact or fancy, it paints a lovely image. Sleepy men glowing like saints inside crystalline cubicles. As you settle in, the rhythm of the room returns. Quills scratching, parchment sighing, wax dripping. Each monk moves in quiet synchrony, their desks angled like chess pieces across the floor. There's something soothing about this, like a communal heartbeat divided into measured lines. Your own strokes begin to follow the rhythm, looping in time with the others. Occasionally, a yawn sneaks out, quickly smothered of course, because yawning mid-scripture feels like spiritual treason. You remember reading somewhere, probably from that gossipy brother Matthew, that one monastery in Europe punished repeated yawning during transcription by assigning the culprit a week of kitchen duty. Better to stir porridge in scripture, the saying went. Your hand aches already. You flex your fingers and glance at your bench neighbor, Brother Thomas, whose posture is flawless. Chin tucked, quill steady, expression blank as a saint in a stained glass window. You wonder if he ever sneaks naps midline. The answer is probably yes. There are even records of monks falling asleep over their work and waking to find entire columns filled with meaningless loops, like medieval sleepwalking signatures. Imagine explaining that to the abbot. You push back, stretch, and examine the wood grain on your bench. It's darkened by candle soot and skin oil, smooth in places where elbows have polished it over centuries. The abbot often reminds you that desks are sacred tools, not furniture. Some monks carve small crosses into the underside before their first lesson, blessing the space where their thoughts will rest. You run your hand underneath and feel the faint outline of one, a hidden prayer beneath every letter you'll write. By mid-morning, the scriptorium grows warmer. The faint chill lifts, replaced by the dry hum of concentration. Someone opens a tiny slit window to let in air, and the breeze brings in a scent of earth and hay. You're momentarily distracted, eyes unfocused. It's dangerous. Once your focus slips, so does your line. A faint blot appears near the bottom of the page, like the ghost of your inattention. You sigh. That's when Brother Hugo, the oldest of the scribes, glides past. His beard could double as parchment fringe, and his hands move with unshakable steadiness. Breathe with the letter, he whispers, not stopping. You try. The strange advice works. You inhale before each stroke, exhale after each line. Slowly, your hand steadies. It's like yoga for monks, minus the mats and incense. Though come to think of it, the room does smell faintly of frankincense from morning mass. You keep writing, adjusting posture as your body demands. The rhythm becomes its own kind of prayer, and time softens around you. At one point, you lean back and glimpse your reflection in the ink pot, a warped, upside-down version of yourself, eyes half-lidded, focused. You almost look like one of those manuscript saints frozen mid-gesture. As hours pass, the abbot rings a small handbell, the signal for terse, another prayer break. You set down your quill and stretch, joints creaking like old hinges. Standing, you realize how deeply your body has molded to the bench's shape. You shuffle toward the cloister walk, sunlight spilling across the flagstones, your knees stiff but grateful. During prayers, your thoughts drift to the desk again. You start to see their purpose not just as tools, but as quiet teachers. Each tilt and angle, each cramped seat and narrow window, all designed to pull your attention inward, to strip away comfort until focus becomes the only luxury left. It's oddly peaceful. After prayers, you return to the scriptorium, now glowing with full daylight. The light catches dust motes, making them look like illuminated punctuation marks floating in the air. You sit again, careful this time, aligning spine and elbow like old friends. Somewhere behind you, a monk sneezes, the sound echoing across wood and stone. You smile faintly, eyes on your line. Another historical truth whispers through the room. Most monasteries taught their scribes to rotate duties, copying one week, binding the next, garden work after that, to protect both eyes and sanity. But the most devoted beg to stay here, addicted to the rhythm of ink and silence. You can see why. The longer you sit, the more the act of writing feels less like labor and more like breathing through the fingertips. The sun tilts westward, and the window light becomes honey-colored. Your posture starts to waver again, your shoulders surrendering inch by inch. You fight back with a deep breath, resetting. This is the daily battle. Posture against fatigue, devotion against gravity. The monks who mastered this balance left behind, not just text, but entire world of order and chaos. Your last lines of the day curve neatly across the parchment. The letters sit in disciplined rows, each one carrying the faint tremor of your humanity. You dust the page lightly with sand to dry it, an old trick, and close your inkwell. The abbot inspects your work, squints, and gives a silent nod that can mean approval or just habit. You'll never know. When the final bell of the evening tolls, you stand and stretch again, the sound filling the hall like a soft exhale. The desks remain behind, patient and eternal, waiting for the next dawn, the next pair of tired shoulders. And as you leave, you realize that maybe perfection isn't in the letters themselves, but in the posture that lets you keep writing day after day, without collapsing into your own ink. The candlelight follows you down the corridor like a faithful thought, flickering but unbroken. The morning light now has a warmer pulse, golden and forgiving, the kind that tricks you into believing you're fully awake when your brain still swims in fog. You return to your desk and find your tools waiting like loyal pets. The quill, the knife, the ink pot. Each one has a small personality, if you stare long enough. The quill tilts forward, eager to dance. The knife glints sharply, threatening rebellion. The ink pot sulks, dark and bottomless. Welcome back to the relationship triangle that defines a scribe's life. Before you write, you need to prepare your instrument. A monk's quill is more than a pen. It's a spiritual prosthetic. The better the quill, the clearer the thoughts, or so they say. The feathers come mostly from geese or swans, though goose quills dominate because they balance strength and flexibility. You run your fingers down one, feeling the faint grease still clinging to the barbs. If you listen closely, you can almost hear the bird honking in protest across centuries. Here's a mainstream historical fact. Every quill was hand-cut using a small penknife, often by the scribes themselves. The term penknife survives even today because of this daily ritual. It's delicate work. You take the knife and trim the feather's end at a slant, slicing away the outer membrane until it's thin and translucent. The smell of cut keratin, like faintly toasted wool, fills the air. You scrape the inner pith clean, then make the vertical slit that gives the quill its split tongue. This is a quill sole, where ink will breathe through capillary grace. You test it on a scrap of parchment. The line is too thick. You adjust again. Slice thinner. Test. Adjust. Slice. Every cut is a decision between boldness and restraint. Some monks say the perfect quill, is one that writes so lightly it feels like thought itself. Others prefer resistance, the gentle scratch that keeps them awake. Historians still argue whether medieval scribes sharpened their quills to specific letter styles, Gothic versus Carolingian, or whether personal comfort dictated shape. Either way, your fingertips are now dusted with feather shavings that sparkle in the light like holy dandruff. Next comes the ritual of tempering. You heat the nib over a small candle flame. Too long and it curls, too short and it stays soft. The air smells faintly of roasted poultry and ink dreams. You hold it steady, count to 3, pull away. The result, a quill that hums faintly with readiness. The knife gleams beside you, and you realize it's the only sharp object you're allowed to wield in the abbey. Dangerous knowledge. That, your bench neighbor, Brother Thomas, yes, the posture saint from earlier, is performing the same ritual but with the precision of a surgeon. His movements are silent prayers. You suspect he sharpens his quill more than he writes with it, the way some people organize their desk as a form of meditation. One fringe tidbit floats through the room's whispered lore. Some scribes swore by quills plucked from the left wing of the bird, claiming they curved naturally toward the page for right-handed writers. Whether that's truth or placebo, it makes sense when you angle your quill and feel how it flows. You grin. Even in the holiest of callings, there's room for superstition about poultry geometry. You dip the nib into ink and watch a bee climb up the slit, trembling before it falls. The first stroke is a whisper on the parchment. Clean, smooth, unbroken. The sound is like a cat's paw dragging gently over linen. You breathe. Your hand steadies. This is where craftsmanship becomes trance. A drop of sunlight lands across your workspace, illuminating the knife blade. Its handle is worn smooth by years of sharpening, trimming, scraping. In an age before pens were disposable, every scribe's knife was an extension of identity. Lose it, and you'd feel as naked as a knight without a sword. There are even records, rare but real, of monks engraving tiny symbols into the handle, a sort of humble heraldry. You glance down and see yours bears a faint mark, a circle with a cross. Maybe it's been there for 100 years, maybe 1,000. You decide it's good luck. The quill needs constant maintenance. After a few lines, the tip dulls and the ink flow weakens. You lift the knife, shave a whisper-thin sliver from the nib, blow off the dust, and return to writing. It's satisfying, the kind of task that forces you to slow down and respect the process. You start to imagine the modern world's office workers trying this, pausing every 10 minutes to reforge their pens with knives. Half would quit, the rest might find religion. Fatigue creeps in again. The repetitive motion of dipping, writing, trimming becomes hypnotic. The candle flame dances just within your peripheral vision, and the letters on your parchment seem to drift slightly, like fish beneath water. You blink. Focus returns. You remind yourself that this is a sacred balance, artistry and exhaustion in constant negotiation. Brother Hugo, the elder scribe, glides behind you again, inspecting. Too deep a slit, he murmurs, and you realize your quill is indeed bleeding ink too freely. He plucks it from your hand, trims it twice, and hands it back without a word. You test it. The line is perfect now, thin and crisp. He gives a slow nod that feels like a benediction. You almost want to frame the quill and never use it again. While you write, your mind drifts. You think about how many pages a single bird's feather might fill. Dozens, perhaps hundreds. The idea that a creature's cast-off wing could become scripture feels poetic. One can almost imagine a medieval monk whispering thanks to the goose for its small act of flight toward immortality. The day's rhythm deepens. Quills dip and glide in harmony, like synchronized swimmers in an inky pool. The smell of parchment, warm, slightly animal, rises as the room heats up. You notice a faint hum in your ears, a kind of resonance born from hours of concentration. The scriptorium becomes less a room and more an atmosphere, dense with breath and purpose. You nick your finger on the knife while trimming. It's shallow but enough to sting. Instinctively, you press your thumb against the wound and glance around. There's a superstition here. If blood touches a page, you must burn that page, for words mixed with blood might summon the wrong kind of truth. You grab a rag, blot the cut, and keep working, suddenly hyper-aware of your pulse in your fingertips. It's easy to forget how physical writing used to be, how dangerous, even. Knives, heat, fumes from gall ink. The faint ache in your back, the tingle in your hand, the perpetual stiffness in your neck, all souvenirs of devotion. You stretch once, then keep going, because there's no such thing as an unfinished page in a monastery. Somewhere near midday, Brother Thomas breaks the silence with a quiet curse. Well, as close to a curse as a monk can manage. His quill has splintered mid-stroke, leaving a jagged trail across his page. You exchange glances, and he grimaces. The feather resists holiness today. He whispers. You stifle a laugh, and it feels like oxygen. The abbot doesn't notice, or pretends not to. Even abbots know that sometimes laughter is a better teacher than reprimand. As the sun begins to set, your desk becomes a battlefield of small shavings and ink smudges. You've cut and recut your quill a dozen times, each iteration close to perfection. Your knife handle is sticky with sweat, and the ink smells metallic in the cooling air. You examine your final line, smooth, balanced, slightly slanted. You realize that every letter carries within it the history of that feather, that knife, that fleeting moment of concentration, when the world was reduced to parchment and ink. A final quirky tradition. Before storing their tools, some monks would thank their quills aloud, whispering a brief blessing or joke. You look at yours and murmur, "You've done well, my feathery friend. Rest easy until tomorrow." It feels ridiculous and sacred all at once. You clean the nib, wipe your blade, and set them both aside. The candle burns low. The room glows in amber hues. Around you, dozens of other scribes perform the same closing motions, a choreography of fatigue and devotion. The faint hiss of sharpening blades blends with the rhythmic sigh of pages being turned. Outside, the evening bell tolls, long and resonant. You stretch your cramped hand, shake the last bits of ink from your fingertips, and realize something small but profound. The perfect line isn't just a product of steady hands. It's a truce between exhaustion and grace. The day ends with you closing your inkwell, tracing the edge of your knife once more, and setting your quill gently on its rest. You imagine it dreaming of wings again. By now, you can almost tell the hour just by the color of the light across the parchment. Late afternoon, warm gold laced with dust motes. The smell in the scriptorium has shifted too, a sharper, iron-tinged aroma creeping from the ink table where the day's batch is brewing. You wander over, rubbing your stiff wrist. The ink maker, an older monk with fingers permanently tinted black, grins faintly as if you've arrived at confession. Ink is the lifeblood of the scriptorium, and its recipe, a guarded secret. Yet in truth, it's more chemistry than mystery. He points to a small pot bubbling on the brazier. Gall, iron gum wine, he murmurs. The ingredients sound like a potion, and in a way, they are. Oak galls, those strange swollen lumps you see on tree branches, harbor a tannic acid that binds with iron salts to form the deep black ink that never quite fades. The gum arabic thickens it, so it flows just slowly enough. And the wine? That's for courage. You lean closer and sniff. It burns the nose a little, sharp and sour, like vinegar mixed with rain. The monk dips a stick in and holds up to the light. The drop glistens brown, almost translucent, before darkening as it meets air. "Patience," he says. "Ink must ripen like a soul." That line feels rehearsed, probably something he tells every novice, but it's still beautiful, a mainstream historical fact. Medieval iron-gall ink is so chemically active that many manuscripts still show its bite today. Letters etched deep into the parchment, sometimes even eating through it. A little too much iron, and the holy word turns corrosive. You imagine centuries later, historians holding fragile pages and whispering that your sleepy handwriting might outlive the skin it was written on. That's commitment. The monk gestures to a row of jars on the shelf, each labeled with tiny symbols. Autumn batch, feast ink, storm ink. Some are reddish, some almost blue. You ask why so many. He shrugs. Weather changes the mood. Ink is temperamental. Indeed, humidity alters its flow. Winter ink crawls, summer ink runs wild. You realize these men were accidental scientists, adjusting formulas the way modern baristas adjust espresso shots. A fringe tidbit floats from memory. Some records claim monks added odd ingredients for spiritual harmony, ashes from burned psalms, powder bone, even a drop of their own blood to sanctify a new batch. Whether symbolic or sincere, It shows how intimate the act of writing was. The abbot would disapprove of such theatrics, but you can almost imagine a lonely scribe thinking, if I bleed for these words, maybe they'll last longer. You watch as the monk pours the ink into small horn pots. The black surface catches a candlelight and turns metallic, like liquid night. He dips a quill to test viscosity, one gentle stroke on parchment, and nods. Perfect. He wipes his hands, though they never truly come clean. Take one, he says, passing you a pot. Don't spill. It stains eternity. You carry it back to your desk like a relic. The scent of fresh ink is oddly soothing, part acid, part earth. You think about how every monastery had its own signature hue. Some lean blue-black, others warm brown. Scholars today can often identify where a manuscript came from just by its ink tone, an ancient brand identity. Sitting again, you dip your quill and draw a slow line. It gleams wetly before settling into matte permanence. The sound is different too, slicker, quieter. You breathe easier. For a few blessed moments, everything flows. But ink is mischievous. After a dozen lines, you notice it thickening in the pot, forming a tiny skin on the surface. You stir with a straw. Too late, the viscosity's changed. It clings to the nib in heavy drops. One falls, splattering a dark sunburst across the margin. You sigh, grab a bit of wool, blot gently. The stain spreads ghost-like. Maybe you can hide it under an initial later. Medieval problem-solving. Creativity through accidents. Your bench neighbor mutters something about adding vinegar. You try it, just a drop, and watch the ink loosen again. A small victory. The kind that feels cosmic when you're half asleep, and your life depends on the smoothness of liquid blackness. Outside, thunder rumbles. Rain begins to tick against the narrow window slits, and a chill drifts in. Perfect weather for ink to misbehave. You hunch closer, shielding the page. The candles flicker, and for a heartbeat the entire scriptorium looks like a row of tiny stars hovering above wooden desks. The atmosphere thickens with wax smoke and concentration. Historians still argue whether medieval scribes truly understood the chemistry behind their ink, or they relied purely on trial, error, and divine luck. Judging by the smell wafting from your pot, divine luck had better be on your side. Still, their intuitive adjustments worked. Many of their pages remain legible after 1,000 years, while modern pens dry up in a week. You pause to flex your hand and glance around. Every monk moves in rhythm with the storm. Some whisper short prayers before dipping quills. Insurance against blots. Others hum softly, maybe to mask the sound of the thunder. The walls, thick as faith, shudder faintly. A few drops leak from the window onto the floor, and someone fetches a rag. Nothing interrupts the work. The rain might rage, the ink might clot, but the letters march on. Another curious detail. The ink master occasionally adds strange preservatives, ground cloves, salt, or even crushed eggshells to keep mold at bay. He claims it keeps the demon from nesting in the pot. You decide not to test the theological accuracy of that, though the spicy scent does seem to linger pleasantly. Maybe demons hate good aroma. You find your rhythm again, hand gliding, mind drifting. There's something about repetitive motion paired with the soft percussion of rain that blurs time. You picture monks in other lands, perhaps in Ireland or Sicily, doing this very thing right now, their own ink steaming, their own wrists cramping, a web of sleepy devotion stretched across continents. As evening deepens, the ink changes character again, darkening with each dip. The fresh air must have thickened it. You adapt, pressing lighter. The discipline feels less like restraint and more like collaboration. Two materials, ink and parchment, negotiating a truce. A tiny mishap interrupts the piece. A moth, drawn to the candle, dives heroically and ends its brief career in your ink pot. You fish it out with your quill, dripping black, and stare at the tiny creature. There's superstition for that too. When the night seeks the word, the devil reads your letters. You chuckle under your breath. Not tonight, friend. You flick aside, wipe your quill, and continue. Hours pass unnoticed. When the rain finally stops, the air feels newly washed. The ink scent lingers heavier, but sweeter somehow, like old with smoke. You look down at your page, rows of even text, each stroke a testament to patience. In some spots, the ink has dried slightly glossier. In others, matte. The variation catches light like subtle embroidery. It's beautiful in a way no printed text could ever be. Imperfection as fingerprint. Before closing the pot, you add a small disc of wax to seal against air. A trick Brother Hugo taught you. Air is the devil of ink, he'd said. You whisper the line as a joke, though it feels true. You stand, stretch, and carry your tools to the back shelf. The ink table now looks like an apothecary crime scene. Smears, rags, mysterious stains that will outlive you. The ink master is already cleaning his pot, humming something that might be Latin or just exhaustion turned musical. On your way out, you glance once more at your hands. Fingers stained with black halos, nails darkened, lines smudged. They look ancient already, like relics dug from a future excavation. You realize that this, too, was part of a monk's identity. The ink-blotted hands that marked him as a servant of the word. Back in your narrow cell, you wash them in a basin of cold water. The stains don't come off. They never fully do. You lie down later with that faint metallic scent still clinging to your skin. It's oddly comforting. Proof that you made something today, that your sleepy labor left a mark, however small, on the endless parchment of time. You close your eyes. The echo of rain and quills follows you into the dark, and you drift towards sleep with the sense that even in dreams, ink keeps flowing somewhere, endlessly, across the silent tables of history. The bell sounds again before dawn, low and resonant, vibrating through stone corridors like a memory you can feel in your ribs. You wake not with alarm but resignation, the slow, ritual kind. Candlelight leaks under your cell door. Someone's already moving in the hallway. Sandals whispering against the flagstones. Your fingers are still faintly black from last night's ink. It's a strange comfort, proof that the page didn't dream itself. You stretch, splash your face with cold water from the jug, and mutter a short prayer that your hand will behave today. When you reach the scriptorium, it's half lit by gray light spilling through the narrow slit windows. Dust hangs like invisible fog. The room smells of candle smoke, wool, and the faintly sweet tang of scraped parchment. Someone has already lit the brazier. The crackle mixes with the steady murmur of a psalm being recited under someone's breath. Each morning begins not with copying a text, but with the ritual of repetition. You sit before a board covered with smooth offcuts of parchment, scrap sheets from trimmed manuscripts, and trace letters endlessly. Straight lines, circles, hooks, curves, the bones of alphabets. The instructor, a round man named Brother Matthias, walks the aisles with a staff that clicks sharply against the floor. Whenever someone's posture falters or a quill scratches too deeply, the staff raps the table in warning. Again, he says, and the word seems to last forever. At first, you thought repetition was punishment. Now you begin to see it as purification. Your breathing slows to match the movement of the pen. Each loop, each deliberate stroke, erases a little bit of restlessness. The letters don't just appear. They arrive, one heartbeat at a time. Brother Matthias once told you that a good scribe's handwriting should be like a heartbeat, steady, living, and without vanity. The letter is not yours, he said. It's God's. You're the muscle that moved the ink. It's an odd thing to hear at dawn, but the longer you practice, the truer it feels. You move from individual strokes to full letters, A, B, C, each formed from memory, not imitation. Then the short phrases begin, copying psalms, Latin prayers, sometimes simple proverbs about patience or humility. By the 50th line, the words blur into texture. In principio, in principio, in principio. The ink gleams faintly wet, then dries matte as you reach the end of the line. Outside, a rooster crows. Inside, your wrist aches in that dull, faithful way it always does by mid-morning. You pause to stretch your fingers. Small cracking sounds echo softly. Across the room, another novice is whispering the words as he writes, his voice rising and falling like a lullaby. The rhythm is contagious. You start to hum under your breath too, without meaning to. It's easy to think of writing as a mechanical act, but here it becomes something closer to breathing practice. Monks wrote to still the mind. Every loop and curl of ink mirrored the rhythm of prayer. The letters themselves were seen as sacred shapes, vessels of divine order. To form one correctly wasn't just skill, it was devotion. Some scribes would deliberately slow down their strokes to match the beat of the monastic chants they heard from the chapel. Others traced invisible crosses before each new line. There's even a note in a 12th century Irish manuscript where a tired scribe confesses in the margin, "Pray for me, my hand is weary and my eyes are dark." That exhaustion was considered holy too, a kind of offering. Brother Matthias interrupts your thoughts. He stops behind you, peers at your page, and makes a small sound, half grunt, half approval. Your hand wavers, he says, tapping near a crooked G. The devil sits in every tremor. Hold steady. You suppress a sigh and nod. Yes, brother. He moves on, the staff clicking again, metronomic. You correct the G. Then another. Then another. Before you know it, you've lost all sense of time again. The scriptorium's rhythm consumes everything. The scraping of quills, the shuffle of sandals, the faint creak of benches under shifting weight. When the bell for the mid-morning meal finally rings, it startles you. The sudden silence after hours of scratching feels enormous. You blow gently on your last line, let the ink set, and close your parchment folder. Your wrist pulses like a second heartbeat. In the refectory, the conversation is muted. Monks eat in silence while a reader stands at a lectern, reciting from Augustine. The words drift like smoke over bowls of porridge and crusts of bread. You chew slowly, listening not to meaning but rhythm. Every phrase feels connected somehow to the script you've been tracing. Sermons about patience, humility, attention. The same lessons, just in different ink. After breakfast, you return to the scriptorium for the second phase. Copying from exemplar. A master page lies before you. Its script immaculate. You lay a thin sheet of parchment over your board, anchor with weights, and begin to copy letter by letter. This is where precision becomes sacred. One mistake, one skipped line, and an entire page might be ruined. So the monks develop small verbal checkpoints. You whisper each phrase before writing it, then glance up, confirm, then repeat it under your breath as the quill moves. The rhythm is chant-like, dicite nobis, dicite nobis. It keeps both mind and hand tethered. Even the pauses matter. A good scribe knows when to lift the quill, how to let the ink settle before the next word. Too much haste, and the page blooms with unwanted blotches. Too much hesitation, and the letters lose flow. Balance is everything. There's an unspoken beauty to the monotony. It turns out that boredom, handled properly, becomes serenity. You stop thinking about time, about hunger, about anything beyond the tip of your pen. Your breath slows, and each stroke feels inevitable. It's what meditation teachers call single-pointed focus. But here, it's learned through repetition and fatigue rather than philosophy. At some point, Brother Matthias walks past again, sees your page, and doesn't stop. That's his highest form of praise. When he finally dismisses the novices for the day, you feel almost dizzy standing up. The sudden motion after hours of stillness makes the world tilt. You stretch, shake your hand, and notice how the light from the high windows has shifted. Afternoon now, soft and golden again. As you put away your tools, a line of thought drifts through your mind like a prayer half remembered. Maybe this is what the word faithful really means. Not belief without doubt, but repetition without resistance. And for the first time, you don't dread the next morning's drills. You know exactly what they'll feel like. The ache, the rhythm, the ink, and somehow that predictability feels like peace. You leave the scriptorium quietly, your head light and your heart steady, carrying the faint smell of parchment and patience wherever you go. By the time autumn settles its cool fingers over the abbey, you've been at this long enough to earn a new assignment, illumination. It sounds radiant, almost glamorous, until you realize it's just another way of saying your handwriting's tolerable enough not to ruin gold leaf. Still, Brother Matthias gives you a thin smile, which in monk language is basically a standing ovation. You're moved from the main scriptorium into a smaller chamber next door, the one that smells faintly of vinegar, smoke, and powdered minerals. It's where the monastery's few artist scribes mix colors and breathe magic into letters. Everything here gleams faintly. Even the dust looks gilded. There's a rhythmic clink of pestles grinding pigment and mortars, and on every desk sits a palette of miniature bowls, each filled with impossible colors: azurite blue from Afghanistan, vermilion red from crushed cinnabar, and gold leaf so thin it flutters when you sigh too hard. The master illuminator, Brother Odilo, looks like someone born from candlelight, his skin a little waxy, his expression both serene and perpetually annoyed. "Sit," he says, gesturing at a stool beside a half-finished capital letter be the size of your palm. Its curves are outlined in ink, waiting for you to fill them with light. And remember, he adds, color is prayer you can see. You swallow. No pressure. You begin by preparing your materials. First, the palette. A small square of slate where you grind the pigments with drops of egg white, honey, and water. The smell is odd but comforting, a faint sweetness beneath the mineral tang. Each mixture has to be perfect. Too thin and it runs. Too thick and it cracks. Then the brush. Not a brush at all, but a quill trimmed to a fine tuft. Brother Odilo demonstrates. His hand moves like water. Everything, he says softly, depends on breath. Paint with your exhale. You try, and immediately overdo it. A faint streak of blue slips outside the line. Odilo sighs. Then perhaps less exhale. You both pretend it's fine. As the morning drifts by, you start to feel the rhythm again. Familiar, steady, the same meditative heartbeat as copying letters, but brighter. Each curve of paint feels like a slow sunrise. The pigments dry into the parchment with a matte sheen that glows under candlelight. Illumination wasn't just decoration. It was theology in color, a mainstream historical fact. Many monastic illuminators believed that light itself was a divine language, color a way to reveal the invisible. Blue symbolized heaven. Gold was a reflection of God's glory. Red marked martyrdom or divine passion. Even a small stroke carried centuries of meaning. But then there's a quirky tidbit. Some monasteries, especially in Northern Europe, secretly use beetle shells or even dried lizard skins to add iridescent shimmer to their paints. The resulting holy sparkle, as one abbot allegedly called it, was both admired and controversial. Historians still argue whether those exotic pigments were signs of vanity or just desperate improvisation during pigment shortages. You're working on a psalm scroll now, each capital letter a miniature world. A blue vine curls through red blossoms. Gold dust catches in your breath when you lean too close. There's a certain absurdity to it, you, half asleep, painting divine light with bug juice. But you can't deny the beauty. Brother Odilo tells you stories as you work about the monks of Lindisfarne, who mixed their ink from soot and oak galls while storms battered their island. About the anonymous artist who painted the Book of Kells Chiro page and then vanished into legend. About how, somewhere in Spain, one monastery kept a cat on parole, literally recorded in the ledgers, just to catch mice that nibbled on parchment edges. A cat, he says, who earned more mentions in the record than most of us ever will. You laugh quietly, and Odilo smiles, which makes the room feel brighter. Afternoons are for gold. You lay down a thin coat of glue made from fish skin. The monks call it gesso, though it smells more like old soup, and then press a square of gold leaf onto it. The leaf quivers, lighter than a sigh, then clings, transforming your sleepy doodle into something divine. When you breathe too close, it trembles and you freeze, afraid of sneezing your week's work into oblivion. Gold, Odilo tells you, isn't for vanity. It's for truth, he says, tracing the glowing halo with the tip of his knife. In Scripture, God's light blinds. Here it dazzles instead. You think about that as you rub the gold gently with a wolf's tooth. Yes, an actual wolf's tooth, supposedly ideal for polishing. The surface warms under your touch until it mirrors your own tired reflection. For a fleeting moment, the light looks alive, like fire caught in a freeze frame. Days blur into one another. The world outside the walls changes color. The leaves falling, the air sharpening, but inside, every moment is measured by pigment and patience. You start to notice tiny joys. The way ultramarine deepens when it dries, the faint tremor of parchment under your palm as it absorbs light. The quiet companionship of other illuminators breathing in rhythm. Sometimes, while waiting for paint to dry, you trace idle shapes on your sleeve with an invisible fingertip. You wonder if the monks ever hid jokes or tiny self-portraits in their illuminations. Spoiler, they absolutely did. One English psalter even has a marginal doodle of a nun playing bagpipes shaped like a dragon. Odilo says such mischiefs are frowned upon, but you notice he doesn't erase them when he finds them. And so, the scriptorium glows, not just with gold, but with the warmth of small rebellions hidden between holy lines. Evenings are quieter now. You've been promoted from novice to journeyman scribe, which means you can choose your own projects. Tonight, The wind moans through the cloister arches, and you decide to start a new page, a dedication to the saints who kept writers sane, which, arguably, should include whoever invented nap breaks. You light a single candle, its flame trembling like a heartbeat. The ink shines black as midnight. The gold breathes light back at it. You realize that, in this world, illumination is less about color and more about survival. The way light keeps crawling back into darkness, line by line. Your quill move without thought now, the motion smooth and unhurried. You're no longer just writing, you're drawing time. Each letter a moment, each pause a lifetime. Near midnight, Brother Odilo pads quietly past your desk. He stops, peers at your work, and after long silence, nods once. You've learned, he says, that beauty isn't speed. You smile. It took me forever. He grins faintly. Exactly. When you finally rise from your stool, the world spins softly, and you realize you've forgotten to eat dinner. The candle has burned nearly to the base. You blow it out, and for a moment, the room glows with afterlight, gold still gleaming faintly on the page, as if refusing to admit it's night. You leave in darkness, your fingers glinting with a faint shimmer of gold dust. You think about how many hands before yours have looked the same, tired, ink-stained, accidentally luminous. There's an irony to it all. Monks who worked by candlelight made pages that seem to shine by themselves. Centuries later, we still open their books and see that same glow, as if the pigment remembers the prayers that shaped it. You smile at the thought, push open the wooden door, and step into the cold cloister. The stars overhead look exactly like flecks of gold leaf scattered across the black sky. Maybe illumination was never just about manuscripts. Maybe it was about learning how to glow in the dark. By the time winter creeps into the cloister, silence takes on a different texture. Thicker, colder, edged with the faint hiss of your own breath. The ink freezes if left uncovered. So every morning someone lights a small brazier in the scriptorium, the smoke curling up like incense for forgotten saints. You walk in wrapped tight, the wool scratching your neck, your hands trembling until they remember warmth. There's frost ghost in the corners of the window slits. You can see your reflection faintly in the glassy sheen, eyes ringed with fatigue, fingers blackened with ink, and a small grin you didn't know was there. Somewhere between summer's exhaustion and autumn's illumination, you've turned into something unexpected. A creature of rhythm and stillness, surviving on candlelight and muscle memory. Today, Brother Matthias assigns you something new, marginalia. You've earned a margin, he says dryly, handing you a stack of vellum. Use it wisely. You blink. Marginalia, the art of drawing or writing the empty edges of pages, was, in theory, a tool for commentary or cross-referencing. In practice, it was a medieval monk's secret whisper to the future. Some scribes drew beasts with human faces. Others wrote signed complaints about cold fingers and empty stomachs. One Irish monk even added, "The ink is thin, the wind is sharp, and my cat keeps walking on my parchment." You grin. Freedom, at last. Your first margin begins with a simple vine, curling along the outer edge of the page. Its tendrils wrap around a capital letter and bloom into tiny faces, half angelic, half mischievous. The faces seem to smirk back at you as you work. You tell yourself you're doing this for aesthetic balance, but a part of you knows it's because you finally can. You're not alone in this rebellion. Across the scriptorium, another monk sketches a rabbit wielding a sword, and when he catches you watching, he raises an eyebrow like a co-conspirator. A few desks over, Brother Odilo paints a saint's halo so wide it nearly brushes the margin line. Silent mischief thrives in the quiet. The rule of Saint Benedict insists that monks avoid idle talk or frivolity, but it says nothing about dragons in the margins. The day passes like a dream. Snow begins to fall outside, faint and slow, each flake drifting down like dust from heaven. You lose track of time. The candle wax pools near your elbow. The quill trembles slightly from the chill. Somewhere, a bell rings for none, the midday prayer, but no one moves yet. Even Brother Matthias, stern as granite, lingers over his own page. He's working on a commentary of Psalms, but in his margin, you spot a faint sketch, a tiny figure of St. Jerome beating his chest with a stone. The irony isn't lost on you. Jerome was a famously grumpy scholar who once complained about lazy scribes. Matthias catches you staring and smirks. Even saints need editing, he murmurs. You almost laugh out loud, which would be a minor scandal. Later, as twilight slides across the walls, you add your own commentary beside a particularly tedious passage. The text reads, "He who perseveres shall inherit the kingdom." You write just below it in small looping letters, "And he who naps shall inherit the pillow." You wait for lightning to strike. It doesn't. Instead, you feel lighter than you have in months. The air smells of ink, candle smoke, and faint laughter. Maybe God forgives good jokes, you think. Maybe he even writes them. A mainstream historical fact. Some monasteries did tolerate this kind of creative play. In the 13th century, the Cistercians of Burgundy actually encouraged marginal art as long as it illuminated the reader's devotion. Of course, devotion turned out to include snails jousting with knights, bishops riding fish, and monkeys dressed as priests. Historians still argue whether these images were satire, allegory, or just a medieval equivalent of doodling during meetings. You suspect it was all three. Winter nights stretch long, and with them come stories whispered during the rare communal fires. Brother Odilo tells of a monastery in Florence where the illuminators painted their own faces on the cherubs, leaving a lineage of secret self-portraits glowing in gold. Another monk recalls hearing a scribe who had riddles in the spacing of his lines, tiny gaps spelling out verses when read diagonally. No one knows if he meant to be clever or was just very bored. The oldest monk in the room, Brother Petrus, speaks of a legend older still, a manuscript said to be alive. He claims it was written entirely by moonlight, each page shimmering faintly in the dark, the letters rearranging themselves whenever read aloud incorrectly. The Book of Breath, he calls it, lost now, or perhaps still hiding in some abbey chest, whispering its corrections to anyone bold enough to read it. Historians, you imagine, would call that nonsense. You, however, have seen what gold leaf does when candlelight dances across it. If pages can glow, maybe they can also breathe. You return to your cell late that night. The air is sharp, and frost creeps along the inside of your window. You light a stub of candle, and unroll one of your practice sheets. The margins twine with creatures, birds turning into vines, vines curling into words, words dissolving into laughter. You can't help but smile at the chaos of it. There's something honest here, more so than any perfect script. The margins are where truth sneaks out, the tiny sighs, jokes, and daydreams that the main text keeps polished and pious. It feels like looking at the heartbeat behind the order. You imagine, centuries from now, someone opening this book and finding your sleepy humor scrawled in the corner. Will they smile? Wonder what kind of person you were? Maybe they'll picture a solemn monk hunched over a candle, not realizing you once spent an entire afternoon drawing a snail with a halo. Your candle sputters. Wax pools over your fingers. You set the quill down, stretch your aching back, and listen to the monastery breathe. Outside, snow falls harder, hushing the world. You realize that the same silence that once felt oppressive now feels generous. Like a pause that invites you in, you whisper a small prayer, not a confession or petition, but of gratitude. For patience, for laughter, for the ink that binds you men who lived and died centuries before. When you finally crawl into bed, the straw rustles softly beneath you. The candle goes out, and for a heartbeat, the darkness feels illuminated from within, not without. You fall asleep imagining a tiny monk drawn in the corner of heaven's manuscript, holding a quill and doodling clouds into better shapes. Morning comes wrapped in mist and bell tones. The frost hasn't melted from the cloister stones, and when you walk to the scriptorium, your breath comes out in little silver ghosts. The room greets you like a memory. Same benches, same smell of ink and tallow, same small warmth from a brazier that tries, but fails, to defeat the winter air. You take your place, spread out your tools, and realize this will be your last manuscript before the season turns. The last before your hand, stiff with habit and devotion, earns its rest. The Abbey has chosen the Book of Hours, a devotional text to guide the prayers of nobles and queens who will never know the cold ink under your nails. The parchment is fine, almost translucent, prepared from calfskin so smooth it feels like breath itself. You're to write the prayers for prime, terce, sext, and none. The rhythm of the day turned into poetry. You begin at dawn when the light is thin and pure. The quill glides almost soundlessly, the strokes smaller now, tighter, more deliberate. You're not chasing perfection anymore. You're listening for balance. The ink flows like a calm stream, no blotches, no hesitation. Brother Matthias passes once, sees your progress, and doesn't speak. You think he's smiling under his hood, though that might just be your imagination or wishful thinking. The lines build slowly, each letter a breath frozen in time. The cold keeps your fingers honest. Every mistake would crack like ice. You keep them steady. By midday, the room glows with quiet purpose. The others work around you, Brother Odilo polishing a finished page with soft cloth, the novices muttering Latin syllables under their breath, the brazier coughing occasionally like an old man. You've long since stopped noticing the aches. They're simply part of the landscape, like the smell of soot or the whisper of parchment. As you pause to stretch, your gaze drifts to the window. The world outside is a blank page, snow stretching across the fields, trees ink black against the white. You realize with a start that this is what your script has been chasing all along. Order within chaos, beauty and restraint. The abbot once said that writing sacred texts was a way to imitate divine creation, bringing form out of void. You used to think that was just pious rhetoric. Now you see the truth of it. The lines, the spacing, the careful geometry. It's all a kind of creation, small and human, but sincere. You write on. There's a saying among the scribes. The page is the mirror of a soul. And as you fill your last folio, you notice something strange. It's calm. Your hand moves like it's known this dance forever. Each word feels like a prayer, even when it's only a preposition. You remember when the work used to exhaust you, how you'd count lines like steps on a long climb. Now the repetition feels like breathing, the pauses like heartbeat rests. Maybe that's the secret of the monk's perfect handwriting. It isn't about control at all, but surrender, a mainstream historical fact. Many surviving medieval manuscripts include colophons, short notes left by the scribe at the end of a book. Some are humble prayers for forgiveness. Others are weary sighs in ink. One, written by a monk named Johannes of Reims, simply reads, "Now I have written the whole thing. For Christ's sake, give me a drink." You smile at that. If anyone's earned one, it's Johannes. A quirky tidbit. One monastery in Bavaria trained its scribes to breathe in time with their writing, claiming that a steady exhale produced smoother letters. They'd literally chant as they wrote, long vowels matching long strokes. Historians still argue whether this was practical mindfulness or just monastic myth, but surviving manuscripts from that abbey have an almost musical regularity. You try it now. Inhale for the downstroke, exhale for the curve. The letters begin to sing. As afternoon darkens toward twilight, you finish the final page. You lean back and stare. It's beautiful, not flawless, not ornate, but alive. Every letter carries a pulse. The margins breathe faintly with faint illumination, the ink drying to a warm brown sheen. You could almost swear the words hum softly in the stillness. Brother Odilo comes over, peers down and lets out a low whistle. "You've written light," he says. You shrug, embarrassed. "It's just the ink." He shakes his head. "No, the ink just carried it." He pats your shoulder, leaves you alone with your work. You take out your knife and score your final signature. Orate pro scriptor. Pray for the writer. Then you set down your quill. The moment hangs there, weightless. The desk feels suddenly empty, the silence too vast. You didn't expect finishing to feel like loss. Outside, the bell for vespers begins to ring. Slow, deliberate, the sound of hours folding into night. You look around the room. The novices are cleaning brushes. Brother Matthias is rubbing warmth into his hands. Odilo is blowing out candles one by one. The light fades in small, respectful steps. You stay until the last flame goes out. The gold on your page still glows faintly, storing the memory of illumination. You realize that in a few weeks, this book will leave the abbey, carried by cart across frozen roads to some noble's estate, where it will sit on a carved table and be opened by candlelight. Someone will run a finger across your letters and whisper the prayers you've written. They won't know your name, but they'll trace your breath. That's the strange eternity of it. You vanish. The writing remains. You stand, stretch, and for the first time in months, leave the scriptorium without taking your tools. The cold night air outside feels like a benediction. The stars look close enough to scratch onto vellum. The wind moves through the cloister arches, humming low, like a psalm half forgotten, but still alive. You walk the cloister slowly, touching the stone walls as you go. Every mark, every dent, every candle scorch feels like writing too. History etched in texture rather than ink. You reach the chapel, peek inside. A few monks are kneeling in shadow, their voices rising in chant. You recognize the rhythm, the steady pulse you've been writing to all along. You kneel too, not to pray exactly, but to listen. The sound folds over you, gentle as snowfall. You can almost hear the scratching of 100 invisible quills joining in. The echo of centuries still writing themselves quiet. When you finally return to your cell, you sit by the window and watch the stars. The night feels like a fresh page waiting to be written. You realize that the monk's secret to perfect handwriting wasn't technique or training or divine inspiration. It was a stillness between strokes, the surrender to time, the willingness to slow until the world aligns with your pulse. You rest your ink-stained fingers on your knees and smile faintly. The calluses, the stains, the cramped knuckles, they've all become part of you, small relative devotion in a modern world that's mostly forgotten how to pause. Outside, a lone owl calls. Inside, the silence answers. You close your eyes, letting the darkness write its own slow sentence across your thoughts. And now, the last candle has gone out. The scriptorium has emptied, but the air still hums with every letter that was ever written here. You can almost see them, faint as dust motes, drifting through the darkness. The words of monks who wrote through centuries of cold mornings and sleepless nights, all to make sure that light could find its way onto the page. You take a slow breath. The echo of their patience lingers. Maybe, without realizing it, you've joined them tonight, not with quill or ink, but with imagination, tracing the same shapes of quiet devotion through your own weary thoughts. In the stillness, time softens. The world outside the abbey fades into gentle blur, snow falling like parchment shavings, wind whispering through old stone, the faint rhythm of your heartbeat matching the pulse of centuries. It's okay to be tired. The monks were, too. They nodded off over holy words, smudged ink, yawned, and started again. Maybe that's the real miracle. Not the beauty of their handwriting, but their persistence, their calm surrender to the slow work of creating something lasting. So, let the last page close now. Let the quills rest. Imagine the ink drying, the candles cooling, the bells fading into the dark. You're part of the silence now, the same silence that has carried words across 1,000 winters. Good night, scribe. Sleep gently, and may your dreams be written in light.